I'm Claire Whitman. I'm 30 years old, and last month, I walked out of my sister's wedding holding the gift I once thought would mean something, because by then, I finally understood I was never really meant to be part of the celebration. For years, I stayed quiet, played the role of the supportive sister, the easy daughter, the forgotten one. But when I saw where they seated me, alone, by the coat rack, something changed. I didn't cause a scene. I told the truth, and the truth did the rest. Before I share how everything unraveled, let me ask, have you ever felt invisible in your own family? If you have, drop a comment below. Hit like if you've ever had to choose your voice over their comfort. And subscribe for the full story. This one is for us. They used to call us the Whitman girls, like we were a matching set. But growing up, it never felt that way. Not really. Ashley was the one everyone noticed. Blonde hair like sunlight, a laugh that filled a room, and a presence you couldn't ignore even if you tried. I was the older sister, the one who remembered birthdays, picked her up from ballet, and stayed out of trouble, the one who didn't demand attention, so they stopped offering it. I was 18 when I moved out of our house in Charlotte. I packed my books, my thrift store kettle, and the secondhand quilt I'd stitched during high school. I had just earned a full scholarship to the University of North Carolina. No party, no speech, just a quiet comment from my mother at the kitchen sink. At least we won't need a loan this time. Meanwhile, Ashley's 16th birthday came with balloons, a chocolate fountain, and a brand new convertible waiting in the driveway. My father handed her the keys with tears in his eyes. A year later, she decided she wanted to study art in Manhattan. The tuition cost more than our annual household income, but somehow, it was an investment in her brilliance. And just like that, she was flown off to New York with matching luggage and a list of contacts from family friends. No one asked if I needed help settling into my dorm. No one called to see how my first semester was going. When my birthday came that fall, it passed unnoticed, except for a dog-eared poetry book left on my desk by a manager at the bookstore where I worked part-time. I didn't cry. I told myself I was lucky, independent, resilient. That's what the oldest child is supposed to be, right? But over time, being strong started to feel a lot like being invisible. Phone calls from home became less frequent. When I called, my mom would ask if I was dating yet. My dad would mention Ashley's latest internship or her new set of friends, young professionals with bright futures and expensive shoes. I nodded. I said I was doing fine, and eventually, they stopped asking. I don't think they meant to leave me out. Not in the beginning. But favoritism doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it shows up in the way one child is celebrated while the other is simply expected to cope. Sometimes, it sounds like silence. I stopped hoping they'd remember. I stopped offering updates. I stopped trying to belong. I made peace with the quiet. I learned to love it. Even built a life out of it. A modest apartment, a steady job, a bookshelf full of things I chose for myself. And then, years later, a cream-colored envelope arrived, tied with a ribbon. Ashley was getting married. And just like that, the silence I had learned to live with cracked open, because deep down, some part of me still believed I was family. I was wrong. That wedding would be the moment everything I thought I had accepted came undone. The envelope was thick, heavier than it needed to be, ivory paper with gold-foiled edges, tied neatly with a satin ribbon in blush pink. My name, Claire Whitman, was written in soft cursive, like someone had taken great care to make it look personal. But the moment I opened it, I felt nothing. No joy, no surprise, just the dull weight of inevitability pressing against my chest. Ashley was getting married. Of course, she was beautiful, radiant Ashley, the daughter they never stopped boasting about, even when she switched careers 3 times in 2 years, the one who flew through life as if the world were made just for her. According to the invitation, the wedding would take place at a private estate just outside of Charlotte. A full weekend of events, rehearsal dinner, garden brunch, sunset ceremony, black tie reception. And somehow, despite the elegance of the print and the delicacy of the ribbon, I knew before reading a single word that this wasn't really meant for me. It was a formality, a checkbox, a polite gesture to avoid family gossip. Still, I told myself I'd go. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I simply believed that being present, quietly, respectfully, it was the right thing to do. I would dress appropriately, bring a thoughtful gift, smile for the photos, clap during the speeches, and leave before the dancing began. No drama, no confrontation, just support, from a distance, the way I always had. But even before the ceremony, signs began to surface, tiny things, subtle, but sharp. My mother called me a week before the wedding. I thought maybe she wanted to go over details, hotel rooms, transportation, and seating plans. Instead, her voice was clipped, almost impatient. Just a quick reminder. Claire, please don't wear anything too bold. Ashley wants all the attention on her. I didn't respond right away, not because I was offended, though I was, but because part of me was genuinely stunned, as if my presence alone might be too much. I assured her I'd dress modestly. She said, "Good," and hung up without asking how I'd been. Then came the bridesmaid list. It was posted on social media first, tagged, reshared, adored. A grid of 8 women in matching robes, laughing over champagne in some high-rise suite in downtown Charlotte, college roommates, high school besties, a couple of new soul sisters from Ashley's yoga group, all of them young, glowing, curated, all of them, not me. I stared at that photo longer than I meant to, not out of jealousy, but confusion. We had shared bunk beds as kids, fought over bathroom time, watched Little Women on repeat every December. She once made me pinky promise that I'd be her maid of honor, even if we were 80 and in wheelchairs. But time has a way of rewriting promises, especially when they become inconvenient. Still, I made excuses for her. Maybe she just wanted her closest friends around. Maybe she didn't want to mix family and friends. Maybe I was reading too much into things again. But deep down, I already knew. This wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was a stage. And there was no room for anyone who didn't fit the image Ashley wanted to project. That image didn't include me. The night before I packed, I stood in front of my closet for an hour. I tried on 3 dresses, not because I was worried about how I looked, but because I was suddenly unsure of what would be considered safe, what wouldn't outshine the bride. I finally settled on a navy blue midi dress, plain, conservative, unremarkable, just like me. As I zipped my suitcase shut, I told myself, one last time, it's just a weekend. Go, smile, be kind. You're doing this for the sake of peace. But peace was never the point. And by the end of that weekend, I'd understand that some invitations are not extended out of love, but obligation. And sometimes showing up means finally seeing the truth that's been there all along. Truth doesn't shout, it whispers. And I was finally ready to hear it. The sun was already dipping low when I arrived at the venue. A grand estate nestled in the hills just outside Charlotte, lush hedges trimmed to perfection, lanterns strung across the trees. the kind of place designed for photo albums and glossy magazine spreads. I stepped out of the car alone, clutching a small gift box wrapped in silver paper. Nothing extravagant, just something thoughtful. Engraved glass, their names, the date, a gesture that meant more than anyone there would probably realize. The valet took my keys. A smiling hostess handed me a program. Another staff member offered me champagne. Everything was seamless, smooth, and curated. I followed the crowd toward the reception hall, walking with measured steps in my navy dress. Not too bright, not too noticeable. Inside, the room was beautiful. White orchids, tall candles, a string quartet playing something soft and expensive. I paused just past the doorway, letting the noise settle around me. A few guests passed by, nodding politely. Most didn't recognize me. Some didn't even glance. And then I saw it. The seating chart. It stood on a gold easel, calligraphy written in looping ink across rows of white cardstock. My eyes scanned the columns, moving faster than I could process. Ashley's college friends were grouped at table 1. The bridal party is at tables 2 through 4. Our aunts and uncles at 5 and 6. My parents at 7, along with close family friends. I kept reading, page after page. No Claire. I blinked. Maybe I'd missed it. Maybe I was looking too fast. I started over. Slower this time. Same names. Same pattern. Still no Claire. A man in a black suit noticed me lingering. He gave a quick nod and gestured toward a hallway near the entrance. Whitman, he asked. I nodded. He turned slightly. We've got you set just over here. I followed, unsure what to expect. A side table. Maybe. Something modest but included. But as we approached, my breath caught. There it was, a single round table, pushed against the wall beside the coat rack, one plastic chair, a wrinkled white cloth barely hides its foldable frame. No centerpiece, no menu card, just a place card with my name scribbled on it. Claire. No last name, no title, just Claire. I stood there for a moment, staring. The music played on behind me, gentle and sweet, like nothing was wrong. But something was. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't a last-minute adjustment. This was a message. I wasn't part of the wedding. I wasn't part of the family. I was an obligation, a loose thread, tucked quietly out of view, away from the photos, away from the laughter, close enough to check a box, far enough to forget. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just stood there, the weight of years pressing against my chest. And then, from somewhere behind me, I heard a soft laugh. Familiar. Too familiar. You're kidding. I turned slightly. Taylor. Ashley's best friend from college. The one who once called me the boring older sister at Thanksgiving dinner. She stood a few feet away, sipping champagne and smirking like she'd just discovered a joke at my expense. She made eye contact, rolled her eyes, turned away. I said nothing. Instead, I reached for the place card, held it between my fingers. The paper bent easily, thin, disposable. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to sit there. Not yet. Not until I spoke to the bride. Not until I looked Ashley in the eye and asked, quietly, plainly, what she thought she was doing. Because there's a difference between being overlooked and being erased. And for the first time in years, I wasn't willing to let it slide. So I turned, walked past the marble columns, down the velvet-lined corridor toward the bridal suite, and with every step, something in me hardened, not from anger, but from clarity. because in that moment, I understood they hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen to leave me out. The bridal suite was tucked away behind tall white doors at the end of a corridor draped in velvet. I walked slowly, the soles of my shoes quiet against the marble floor. In my hand, I still held the place card with my name, creased now from where my thumb had pressed into it too tightly. Claire. Just Claire. No table number. No welcome. When I reached the doors, I paused for a moment, letting the quiet settle over me. I wasn't here to cause a scene. I wasn't here to fight. I just needed to hear her say it. Out loud. I needed to know if she truly meant to place me there, or if this had all been some kind of mistake. I knocked once. A voice inside, light, airy, called out, "Come in." I stepped inside, and for a second, it felt like I'd walked into a photograph. Ashley was sitting on a velvet bench near the window, surrounded by soft lighting and the faint scent of roses. Her makeup was perfect, hair pinned up with silver clips that sparkled as she turned her head. A group of women laughed beside her, but the laughter faded when they noticed me. Ashley's eyes met mine. Her smile didn't falter. Not at first. "Claire," she said, almost surprised. "You made it." Her tone was warm, too warm, like a hostess greeting a distant cousin she barely remembered. I held up the place card. "This is where I'm seated." She blinked. For a moment, just a flicker of something passed across her face. Then she pressed her lips together and nodded slightly. "Oh, right." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. There were some last-minute changes. The head tables were getting crowded. I kept my voice calm, and I was the one who got moved. Ashley shrugged. "You didn't bring a guest. You're not in the bridal party. And, well, you're not exactly close with the rest of the family. I thought maybe you'd prefer something quieter." Quieter. As if she'd done me a favor by placing me next to a coat rack, as if being forgotten was a kindness. I took a breath. My heart was steady, not broken, not angry, just still. "Ashley," I said, "I'm your sister." She gave a soft laugh, not cruel, just distant. "Claire, you've been gone for years. You barely come around. You didn't even RSVP to the rehearsal dinner. What did you expect?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe something small. A seat at the edge of the main room. A nod of recognition. A moment that said, "You still matter." But that moment never came. The door creaked behind me, and our mother stepped inside, ivory clutch in hand. Her hair was pinned neatly, face calm. She looked between us and then at the place card in my hand. Her expression didn't change. "Claire," she said softly, "don't stir things up. Today is Ashley's special day." I turned to her. "You knew about my seat." A pause, then a nod. "I told Ashley you might feel hurt. But come on, you're grown now. Don't take it personally." There it was. The sentence that landed harder than anything else. Not the seating, not the absence from the bridal party, but that line, "You're grown now. Don't take it personally." As if growing up meant I had outgrown the right to be treated like family. As if adulthood came with the expectation of being quietly discarded. I looked at Ashley again. Her eyes didn't hold guilt, just mild irritation, like I was inconveniencing her before her big moment. And in that moment, something inside me went still, not shattered, not bruised, just still. A thread that had held me to them, delicate, stretched thin over time, finally snapped. And I had no intention of tying it back together. I nodded once, then turned toward the door. As I stepped back into the hallway, the music from the reception room drifted faintly through the air. Laughter, glasses clinking, celebration. Behind me, they went back to their preparations. And I went back to the place they had prepared for me. Not as a guest, not as a sister, but as a quiet reminder of how easy it is to erase someone when you think they won't say a word. By the time I returned to the reception hall, the cocktail hour was in full swing. Soft jazz floated above the clinking of champagne flutes. Laughter moved from table to table like a traveling breeze. No one noticed I had been gone. No one asked why I looked pale, or why my heels echoed louder than they should have against the polished floor. I walked back toward the tiny table by the coat rack, the one they called mine. A staff member had set a folded napkin and a water glass at the edge, as if that made it feel less like a waiting area and more like a place someone belonged. But I wasn't alone. A woman was already standing there, holding a glass of champagne with the kind of poise that suggested she didn't do small talk. She commanded it. Her dress was elegant, understated. Her posture told me she was used to walking into rooms where people turned to look. She glanced down at the place card with my name on it, then looked up and met my eyes. "You must be Claire." Her voice was soft, but sharp enough to slice through the music. I nodded, cautious. "Yes, I'm the bride's sister." Something flickered behind her expression. Not a surprise. Curiosity, maybe, or amusement. "I'm Diane Harper," she said. "Ethan's mother, the groom's mother." "Of course." I offered a polite smile, unsure what else to give. She tilted her head slightly. "Funny. Ashley hasn't said much about you." I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I wasn't mentioned in the bridal party? That I was seated beside jackets and forgotten umbrellas? She looked around the space. Strange. Though, a biological sister, not seated with the family, not even with the main guests. Then she turned back to me, her gaze steady. "Are you sure you're close to them?" There it was. Not a question. A message. I knew, in that moment. She wasn't simply making conversation. She had come with the intention, with timing, with precision. Every word, every glance, was designed to place me just one rung lower than I already was. Ashley hadn't just erased me from the photos. She'd rewritten the story entirely, painted herself as an only child, or worse, as the misunderstood daughter, weighed down by a difficult sister. I smiled gently. I suppose Ashley prioritized the people she feels closest to. Diane raised an eyebrow. "So, her own sister doesn't count." Her tone wasn't cruel, just clinical, like she was diagnosing a crack in the glass and wondering how deep it went. That's when I realized this wasn't a coincidence. Diane hadn't wandered over. She had arrived, at the perfect moment, in the perfect place, with the perfect words to remind me of what I already knew: that I didn't belong here, that I was furniture that no one sat on, a name no one said, a seat no one visited. But then, something shifted in me, a memory, something Ashley had whispered months ago, when we still met for coffee every once in a while, before this wedding swallowed her whole. She called Diane a control freak in pearls, said she only put up with her future mother-in-law because she didn't want to cause drama before the wedding, said she couldn't stand the idea of Diane giving a speech. She joked once, "If she grabs the mic, I swear I'll fake an allergic reaction." At the time, I had laughed, but now, the words resurfaced like a lifeline, a reminder. Ashley had rewritten me out of her story. But she'd forgotten something. I knew the parts she never meant to share. I looked Diane in the eye. Calm. Even. Honestly, I said, I'm just surprised to see you being so friendly. She blinked. Oh, why's that? I let my voice drift. Light. Casual. Like I was remembering something unimportant. Ashley usually gets tense whenever she talks about you. Diane's glass paused mid-air. Once. She even said, if she gives a speech, I'll walk out. I smiled softly. Not cruelly. Just evenly. And watched as Diane Harper, the woman Ashley had spent months trying to impress, stood frozen beside a table no one wanted. A storm was coming. And for once, I wasn't the one standing in its path. Diane didn't respond right away. She stood there, her hand still wrapped around the stem of her champagne glass, her fingers perfectly manicured, frozen mid-motion. It was only a second, but long enough for me to know my words had landed. She didn't blink, didn't sip, just stared. What did you say? She asked softly. I tilted my head, pretending to search my memory. Oh, maybe I remembered it wrong, I said, with a shrug. Anyway, it's probably not my place. Just something Ashley said months ago. But we both knew I hadn't remembered it wrong. And we both knew it was my place now. Because Ashley had dragged me out of the picture, hoping no one would notice what was missing. But the space she left behind, it echoed. And now, someone else had heard it too. The tension between us thickened. Not loud, not hostile, just heavy, like glass bending under pressure. I could feel her calculating, trying to decide whether to dismiss me, confront me, or pretend none of this had happened. But Diane Harper wasn't a woman who swallowed slights. She chewed them slowly, examined them carefully, then decided what to do next. She set her glass down on the small, forgotten table beside us, the one near the restrooms, the one no one lingered at, unless they had no other choice. Well, she said, finally, that's disappointing. But the disappointment wasn't in me. It was in Ashley. She didn't need to say it. It was written in a way her posture stiffened, the way her eyes narrowed. Not in rage, but in realization. She was starting to put the puzzle together. And Ashley, the smiling, polished bride, no longer looked quite so shiny from this angle. I didn't press, didn't add more. I didn't need to. Ashley had handed me years' worth of secrets and assumed I'd never use them. But she forgot that silence only stretches so far. And eventually, it snaps. The string quartet shifted into something slower, a soft ballad. Guests began returning to their seats. The chatter dimmed as the ceremony approached, but Diane didn't move. She stood there, eyes on the far end of the room where the bridal party was beginning to assemble. And then, without a word, she turned and began walking, straight toward the front, toward the place where Ashley would enter. Her steps were measured, her face unreadable, but I could tell she wasn't heading there to smile. She was heading there for answers. I stood still, letting the music pass over me, the voices swirl around me. A few guests walked by, brushing the edge of my dress. None of them knew what had just unfolded by the coat rack. None of them realized that the bride's perfect day had just shifted, slightly but irreversibly, on its axis. A minute passed, then two, then the sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I turned slightly. Ashley, stepping out from a side hallway, bouquet in hand. Her gown shimmered in the low light, every pearl and bead meticulously stitched, every strand of hair pinned into place. She looked radiant, effortlessly beautiful. But when her eyes met Diane's, waiting, silent, unmoving, her smile faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to, because something had changed. Ashley, for all her charm and poise, had spent months shaping a story, one where she was the adored daughter, the thoughtful bride, the woman with everything in place, and I was the complication she'd quietly erased. But now, standing beside a table no one respected, I had given that story its first crack. And I wasn't finished yet. The music dipped lower. A hush spread across the reception hall like falling snow, gentle, almost imperceptible at first, then undeniable. All eyes turned forward, to the podium near the stage, where a microphone had been set up for the traditional speeches, toasts, well wishes, carefully curated words meant to polish the night into memory. But it wasn't a bridesmaid or best man who approached the mic. It was Diane. She didn't smile as she walked, didn't pause to adjust her dress or glance at her son. Her eyes were fixed, cool and deliberate, on the woman in white who now stood frozen mid-step with a bouquet clutched in her hands. Ashley. I watched from the edge of the room. My glass of orange juice is still untouched. I had no plan. I wasn't there to ruin anything. I had only meant to tell the truth. To one person, one conversation, one crack in the glass. But what happens when truth begins to echo? What happens when one person finally hears it and refuses to stay silent? Diane reached the mic. She didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, she looked out over the guests' family, friends, strangers, and then turned her gaze back to her future daughter-in-law. Ashley shifted. A smile tugged at her mouth, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her jaw tightened, her posture stiffened. She glanced toward Ethan, who stood a few feet behind her, watching, waiting. And still, Diane said nothing. She just stood there, long enough for people to begin whispering, long enough for the silence to take shape. And that's when I moved. I didn't rush, didn't stomp. I simply walked forward, past the rows of perfect white chairs, past the waiters refilling glasses, and the aunt who still didn't know my name, past the people who had chosen not to see me. I walked to the edge of the stage and stopped. Ashley's eyes met mine. Fear, then fury. "What are you doing?" she hissed, the words barely moving her lips. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. I turned to Diane. "May I say something?" For a moment, Diane didn't respond. Then she stepped aside, just half a pace, just enough. And I stepped up to the microphone. The ballroom shifted again. Glasses lowered, conversations stilled, chairs creaked as people turned. I didn't shout. I didn't tremble. I raised my glass to chest height, held it steady, and spoke. "Excuse me," I said, my voice clear, measured. "May I have a moment?" The string quartet quieted completely. Ashley went still. "Mrs. Harper," I continued, keeping my tone even. "Ashley once told me, don't let Diane wear a metallic dress. She'll outshine me." A few guests chuckled under their breath. One of the bridesmaids dropped her napkin. Ashley stepped forward. "Stop it," she whispered. "This isn't the time." But I kept going. She also said if you gave a speech today, she'd grab the veil and walk out. The air rippled, not with chaos, but with attention, focused, Absolute. Ashley said she was only tolerating you to avoid conflict before the wedding, that you were too controlling, that after today, she'd find ways to limit your visits. Diane stared at Ashley. Her expression didn't move, but her grip on the podium tightened. Ashley's voice cracked. You're twisting things. I turned toward her. Am I? Silence. 1 second. Then two. Then a single laugh from somewhere in the back of the room. Not cruel. Just stunned. She once said. I added. I'd rather get married without a ceremony than let my mother-in-law give a boring speech that puts everyone to sleep. The last word hadn't even settled before the room broke open. Whispers. Gasps. Shifting bodies. Glances exchanged behind champagne glasses. My mother stood at the far right wall, still, pale. My father looked down. Ashley. She looked at me, but she wasn't angry anymore. She was cornered, exposed, and for the first time in my life, she couldn't edit me out of the moment. She had written a story where I didn't exist. But now, everyone knew, I was still here. And I had the mic. Ashley stared at me like I had set fire to her dress. Her cheeks were flushed, her mouth slightly open, but no words came out. The entire room had shifted, no longer a celebration. It was a reckoning. Whispers moved like waves, one name floating through them again and again. Claire, 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 behind Ashley. Ethan stepped forward, not hurriedly, but with a quiet determination. He looked at her, not with confusion, not yet with anger, but with a question forming behind his eyes. Ashley, he said, calm but cutting through the noise. Is it true? Her head whipped toward him. No, she snapped, too quickly. Of course not. She's twisting everything. She's doing this to ruin my day. But Ethan didn't answer. His expression didn't shift. He was still staring, not at her dress, not at the people around them, but directly into her face. So you didn't say any of those things to your sister? Ashley faltered. I might have said something small, but not like that. You know how Claire is. She always exaggerates. She turned toward me, voice sharpening. This is what you wanted, isn't it? For people to pity you? For me to look like a monster? I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence speak for me. And then Diane stepped back toward the mic. Her voice was low, but it carried across every table. I didn't imagine those late-night calls. I didn't hallucinate the distance. I wondered why you always looked uncomfortable around me. Ashley. Now I know. You weren't tolerating me. You were calculating me. Ashley reached out toward her. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. This isn't how it was supposed to go. No, Diane said, stepping away. It wasn't. It was supposed to be a day built on love. But instead, it's built on control, half-truths, and carefully rehearsed lies. Ashley turned toward our parents like a drowning woman reaching for anything that would float. But our mother just stood there, her hands frozen at her sides. Our father looked at the floor. Neither one moved. Neither came to her defense. I could see it. The realization was settling into Ashley's bones. This moment couldn't be salvaged with a clever speech or a soft smile. This wasn't like the school assemblies where she always got louder applause. This wasn't a family dinner where she could charm her way back to the center of attention. This was real, and it was collapsing around her. You've made your point, she hissed through clenched teeth, looking at me. You ruined my wedding. I hope you're happy now. No, I said softly. You ruined it. I just stopped protecting the story you wanted everyone else to believe. She laughed, sharp and bitter. You think you're noble? You think speaking now makes up for a lifetime of being silent? No, I replied, steady and clear. But it makes me free. Ethan looked at her once more, and this time, his voice was barely above a whisper. You told me you were close with your family, that your sister was your best friend. His eyes drifted toward me, then back to Ashley. Now I don't know what to believe. Her lips trembled. I was just venting. That's all it was. She twisted everything. But no one was listening anymore. Even the guests who once adored her were now turning away, shifting in their seats, whispering behind hands. People who once clapped for her entrance were now avoiding eye contact, unsure whether to stay seated or quietly slip out the back. And standing at the center of it all, beneath the warm lights meant to frame her beauty, Ashley finally looked like what she had spent years pretending not to be: alone. She turned to me once more, voice shaking. You win. I met her eyes. No, Ashley, you lost. Because you thought no one would ever speak. And the thing is, for a long time, I didn't. I let her take the spotlight, let her bend the truth, let her family turn into something curated instead of real. But not anymore. Not today. Not in front of a room full of people who needed to see what was behind the glitter and smiles. She looked around one last time, as if someone, anyone, would reach for her hand and tell her it was all okay. But no one did. Not Ethan, not our parents, not even the bridesmaids who had laughed in matching robes just hours before. That was the moment it all broke. Not with a scream, not with a crash, but with silence. Heavy, final. And I stood there, not proud, not victorious, just honest. Finally, I didn't leave right away. I stayed where I was for a long moment, bathed in the glow of chandeliers that had once been meant to spotlight a fairy tale. The hall, once filled with music and wine and soft laughter, now felt still, heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. No one spoke to me. No one rushed to Ashley's side. Everyone was waiting for someone else to fix what had cracked wide open. But some things, once broken, don't go back together. I turned slowly and walked toward the front of the hall, past the podium, past the guests who looked everywhere but at me. Some bowed their heads. Others traced the rims of their glasses or reached for their phones just to give their hands something to do. There were no angry whispers, no protests, just silence, the kind that comes when the truth has been spoken too clearly to ignore. I made my way to the gift table. It was still draped in soft white linen, dotted with elegantly wrapped boxes and envelopes. In the center sat the gift I had brought that morning. A wooden box, engraved with Ashley and Ethan's names, the date. A glass panel on top with a quote etched in delicate script. Something about building a life together. I had picked it carefully, had it customized weeks in advance. It wasn't expensive, but it had meaning. And now, it didn't belong here. I reached for it, lifted it gently with both hands, and turned back toward the room. My mother's voice cut through the air, low and strained. Claire, what are you doing? I didn't answer. She knew. They all knew. This wasn't spite. This wasn't drama. This was clarity. You don't give a gift to someone who's made it clear you're not family. I walked toward the exit slowly, the box cradled against my chest. Every step felt lighter than the one before. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because the weight of pretending had finally been set down. From behind me, I heard Ashley's voice, desperate, sharp. You're so immature. Even now, You have to make a scene. I stopped, turned slightly. My voice was quiet, but steady. Oh, no. I'm not making a scene. I'm just reclaiming a misdelivered package. Wouldn't want it causing an allergic reaction in your married life. A few guests stifled a laugh. Others didn't bother. There was no energy left to maintain the illusion. Ashley didn't respond. She just stood there, cheeks flushed, hands trembling around her bouquet like she didn't know what to hold on to anymore. I looked toward Ethan. He was staring at the box in my arms, then at Ashley, then back at me. He didn't say anything, but he didn't stop me either. And in that silence, I heard everything I needed. My mother took a step forward, her voice now urgent. Claire, please, don't make this worse. Just leave the gift and go. But I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I tightened my grip on the box. I think everything's clear now. I'm just following the rules this family has shown me. Not invited, not welcomed, not needed. And with that, I walked the last few steps to the ballroom doors. At the edge of the room, near the champagne table, Diane stood watching me. Her expression wasn't cold. It wasn't angry. It was still. And then, something I had never seen in her face before. She nodded, not as approval, not as sympathy, but as recognition, as if, for the first time, someone had seen the whole picture, and I was no longer the girl sitting quietly by the coat rack. I stepped through the open doors and into the hallway. The air outside the ballroom felt different, cooler, clearer. I kept walking. No rush, no shame. The box in my hands, no longer a symbol of inclusion, but one of self-respect. From behind me, Ashley called out one last time, "You'll regret this." I didn't turn around. I didn't slow my pace. Because when someone shows you, again and again, that you're not part of their story, the most powerful thing you can do is stop begging to be written in and start walking away. I stepped out into the evening, the heavy ballroom doors clicking shut behind me with the finality of something finished. Outside, the air was sharp and still, not cold, not cruel, just clear. The kind of air that reminds you how quiet the world can be when no one's watching, when no one's asking anything of you. I stood there for a moment on the stone steps, the wooden box still pressed gently against my ribs. No one followed me. No one called out. Not my mother. Not my father. Not even Ashley, whose voice had always been the loudest. For a while, I didn't move. I let the breeze lift the hem of my dress, let the silence stretch around me like a second skin. And slowly, I realized I wasn't numb. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. Done trying to squeeze myself into a family photo that never had a frame for me. Done pretending I didn't notice when I was seated at the edge. Done making excuses for the way they made me feel small. I walked toward the parking area at the back of the estate. The path curved past the rows of manicured hedges and soft garden lights. No footsteps behind me. No whispers following. Just the sound of gravel under my shoes and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. When I reached my car, I opened the door slowly and placed the gift box in the passenger seat. It looked strange there, next to the coffee-stained cup holder and the crumpled grocery receipt, like a reminder of a version of me that still believed in keeping peace, even when it cost me my voice. I didn't drive away right then. Instead, I sat behind the wheel and closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't rehearse a conversation in my head. I didn't imagine what I could have said differently. I didn't think about whether I was too harsh or too late. I just let myself be quiet. And then, like clockwork, my phone buzzed. I didn't rush to check it. I knew what would be waiting. 16 missed calls, 9 voicemails, 22 text messages, all from the same people who had ignored me for years. My mother, Ashley, an aunt in Arizona who only remembered I existed when her daughter needed help with college forms. I picked up the phone and stared at the screen for a while, not out of curiosity, but with the kind of calm detachment that comes after a long, bitter storm. The messages weren't surprising. Claire, what have you done? You ruined her big day. You embarrassed this family. Call me back. This isn't over. You're jealous. You always have been. And finally, buried near the bottom, a message that made me pause. From my father. Call me when you can. Nothing urgent. Just think you should know a few things. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even specific. But it was different. I stared at it for a moment, then tapped call. He answered on the second ring. Hey, kid. His voice was quieter than I remembered, a little worn around the edges. I'm listening, I said. He exhaled. I could hear the weight in his breath, the hesitation in his silence. I wasn't planning to get involved. You know how I am. I usually let your mother and Ashley handle things. I thought staying quiet was the same as keeping peace. I said nothing. He continued. But yesterday, I watched you walk out, and I saw their faces, and I realized silence isn't peace. It's permission. I felt something shift in my chest. A knot I didn't even realize I was holding begin to loosen. I just thought you should know, he added. Ethan didn't go back to the hotel with Ashley. He went to his mom's. According to Diane, they argued all night. I leaned back in my seat, staring out at the trees. And Diane, he continued, called your mother this morning. Said she doesn't want Ashley involved with their family anymore. Called her dishonest. Said she doesn't deserve to marry her son. He paused. I figured you'd want to know. I didn't respond right away. I let his words sit in the air between us, not for satisfaction, not for revenge, just for clarity. And finally, I said, thank you for telling me. He sighed again. Claire, I'm sorry for a lot of things. I don't know if I can fix them, but I want you to know. I saw you yesterday. I finally saw you, and for the first time in years, I believed him. The call with my father ended quietly. No dramatic declarations, no promises to make it right. Just a tired kind of honesty that felt new between us. After I hung up, I sat in my car for a while longer, watching the early light stretch across the windshield. I wasn't sure if what I felt was peace, but it was close. A kind of weightlessness that comes when you stop carrying what was never yours to hold. The notifications kept coming in waves. More missed calls, more messages. Most of them sounded the same. Accusations disguised as concern, guilt packaged in sentences like, you could have handled this better, or you didn't have to go that far. But none of them asked how I was feeling. Not one message said, I'm sorry we let it get this far. And not a single one from Ashley asked why I said what I did. She already thought she knew. To her, I wasn't a sister anymore. I was the problem. But here's the thing no one likes to admit. Truth tellers are rarely welcome in rooms built on performance. They don't hate you because you lie. They hate you because you remember. And I remembered everything. I remembered the years of quiet birthdays, the missed calls, the condescending comments disguised as jokes, the family photos I was cropped out of, emotionally if not physically. I remembered the conversations where I swallowed my hurt because it wasn't the right time, because it would ruin the moment, because I didn't want to seem difficult. But what happens when every moment becomes the wrong time to speak? Eventually, silence becomes a habit, then a prison, then a scar. Ashley had counted on my silence. My whole family did. That's why they never took precautions. Why do they never soften their edges? They didn't think they had to. And maybe they were right. For a long time, I helped them build that illusion. I kept my voice low, my needs small, my expectations even smaller. I wanted to be the good daughter, the easy sister, the one who didn't rock the boat. But I wasn't quiet because I was kind. I was quiet because I was trained to believe kindness meant never choosing yourself. I'm not proud of what I said at the wedding, but I'm not ashamed either. People keep asking, why now? And the answer is simple. Because someone had to. Because Ashley walked through life rewriting the story until she was the only one left in it. And no one stopped her. Because the people who knew better looked away. Because I looked away until I couldn't anymore. She thought I ruined her big day, but I didn't break anything. I just held up a mirror. And she didn't like what was looking back. After that weekend, I didn't hear from Ethan again. But I didn't need to. The silence told me everything. Whether they called off the wedding or just postponed it, I'll never know for sure. All I know is that Diane didn't let it go quietly, and that was enough. As for my mother, she still believes I embarrassed the family. She believes I overreacted, that I let jealousy guide me, that I should have just smiled through one more evening like I had done so many times before. She doesn't understand that silence was the problem, not the solution. And honestly, I stopped trying to explain it. Sometimes people don't want clarity, they want comfort. Even if that comfort is built on exclusion, even if it means losing a daughter just to keep a narrative. But me, I didn't lose anyone. They just revealed what was always true, that I was never really included, that I was tolerated, but never embraced. And once you see that clearly, going back is no longer an option. You don't walk into fire twice just because someone hands you a prettier match. So I stayed gone. And for the first time in my life, that choice didn't feel like giving up. It felt like choosing me. I didn't expect the silence afterward to feel this calm. For a long time, I thought distance would ache, that walking away would leave an emptiness I'd carry around like a wound. But what surprised me was how full my life began to feel when I stopped asking people to make space for me, when I stopped showing up hoping to be noticed, when I let go of the idea that blood alone meant belonging. In the days that followed, no apology came, not from Ashley, not from my mother. A few distant relatives reached out, some with sympathy, others with shallow attempts to smooth things over. She didn't mean it like that. It was a stressful day. Families fight. But none of them said what really needed to be said. No one said, "You were right to speak." And that's fine, because I wasn't looking for validation. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to be whole. I started spending more time with people who didn't know me as someone's sister. I rebuilt small things, slow mornings, quiet routines, meaningful conversations. I reclaimed my own voice, not to shout, not to retaliate, but simply to hear myself clearly again. For years, I tried to be smaller, quieter, easier to manage, but you can only shrink yourself for so long before you vanish completely. I'm not invisible anymore. Not to myself. Ashley's wedding didn't fall apart because I told the truth. It fell apart because it was built on a version of her that couldn't hold under pressure. And when the truth finally surfaced, the story collapsed. As for my father, we still talk sometimes, not often. But when we do, he listens now. Not like before. Not with surface politeness. but with intention. And that, to me, means more than any performance of parenting ever could. I don't know what Ashley tells people about me now. Maybe I'm the villain in her version of events, the bitter sister who couldn't stand her happiness. Let her have that. Let her keep the story that makes her feel better. I don't need to rewrite it, because I know who I am, and I know what I did. I didn't destroy anything. I simply refused to stay silent. Sometimes, we're taught that being quiet is graceful, that it keeps the peace, that it makes us mature. But silence can also be complicity. And there comes a point where speaking up isn't about causing harm, it's about preventing more of it. Walking away doesn't always mean giving up. Sometimes, it means you finally stopped begging for scraps at a table you were never meant to sit at. And when you do, you find something better. You find yourself. So tell me, have you ever been the quiet one, the one left out, the one who finally chose truth over comfort? If you have, I see you, and I promise, you're not alone.